click record, please. Sorry everyone for the for the technical issue. That's also the first time for us. Okay, is it recorded? Chana, could you please confirm?
Hello, dear aunt. We can start the session now. Can you hear me? Okay.
So is Mr. Cheyenne who will start to and say a few words about.
Good morning, Stéphane.
Good morning,
Good
Mr.
morning,
Cheyenne.
all participants from Vietnam and Cambodia. I'm here in Chiang Mai with our participants, 9 of them from Chiang Mai University and 5 of them from Thammasat, who just joined us last night. The ASEAN Water Platform, which will organize at Chiang Mai University, will take place in Chiang Mai and also in Chiang Rai, because we would like to bring our participants to visit Chiang Khong, a small district located on the Mekong River, so that the participant can actually see the Mekong River and the situation of the water level, as well as talking with local people. We will also invite scholars who have been doing research on the Mekong River on different aspects to give lecture, and also Ruth Banomyong will also accompany us, and he will introduce the concept of ASEAN connectivity from logistic point of view, focuses upon road, rail, and routes. After that, we will take the participant to visit a small village in Lampang province to look at how villagers manage their forest fire during this dry season. And of course, we will talk about the haze pollution in northern Thailand, as well as in the neighboring countries in the region, in Chan State and in Laos. Besides the issue of haze pollution, we will also introduce to our participants the issue of land relation in the region. Land relation means the investment by some companies from Thailand, from China, from Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, and Myanmar. So we will look at this this kind of investment and also environmental change and inequality in the region. After that, we will come back to Chiang Mai and wrap up our session, and also ask the participant to present the experience they have during this workshop. So during these 2 weeks, ASEAN Water Platform, we hope that some plenary session can be participated by participants from Vietnam, from Cambodia through Zoom. And we hope that we can, if the technologies allow, we can provide opportunity for participants from the 3 countries to interact and to exchange their view and experience of this APW. Right. That is a short introduction of what we are planning to do for AWP at Chiang Mai University. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cheyenne, for this, this short introduction. From my side, what I will say is, well, I'm little sad to see that we are in front, all of us, the computer, but I will also add that I'm very glad to see how many efforts we did all together to organize at the national level this ASEAN Water Platform, because 1 year and a half ago, yes, the goals was to organize this summer school at WP in Chiang Mai, in presential, during 14 days all together. And I remember the field trip with Kanchana and Ziepang from GAS, and everything was okay for the session, the training session. Unfortunately, we have this pandemic all over the world, and it's for me give me the opportunity to share with you that I hope you are in a healthy situation, you and your family. I'm very happy to see our many strategy we developed to implement this AWP in Chiang Mai, but also in Phnom Penh, and also, well, in Hanoi now. And we can be proud to see that the organizer in the different country and make a good job to organize this event, and including some workshop on the field, what it will be implemented in Thailand and in Vietnam. And really it was not so easy to do that, and I would like to thank all the trainers and the staff who organized that this month during 2 weeks, what is a long, very long session, but it's nice to see that finally all the hard work we did, we can share it now, starting this morning. I would like to come back a little bit on the program, and if we can share the program, I will be happy to say a few words about that. But I don't see the Excel file in front of me. Kanchana, maybe or Ziepang, can you share the general program? Hello?
อ้อยเขาขอ
Ziepang?
Yep.
Okay, can you share the, okay, thank you. So, but I will not be able to okay, so come back maybe to the, and put it on the large screen that everybody will be able to see the 2 weeks program. Hello, Ziepang?
Yes.
Can you put full screen on this file?
I did it on full screen.
But we cannot see the second week.
It's very, okay. This is better?
No. Okay, bon, it's not, no, it's not full screen. But anyway, As you see, during these 2 weeks, we have in this file we have a general program, and I will underline that we will have a common session today, tomorrow, and Wednesday afternoon. So all participants should be online. You have the topic of each speaker, and also the second week you will see on Friday, March 5th at 3 p.m. we will organize the result of a new module we proposed this year. It's an innovative research competition. We have around 15 candidates. We will already send a research proposal from Thailand, Phnom Penh, and Vietnam. We built already a jury to evaluate this research proposal. We will work on that all together this week and next week, reading the proposal and through some interview with each candidate. And on Friday, March 5th at 3 p.m., we will have the announcement of the result of the IRC, and we will allow, it will be a pleasure to hear the laureate, the 3 or 4 laureate that we will identify during these 2 weeks. And after, on Saturday morning, maybe we can start at 9:30. During 30 minutes, each workshop, we have 4 workshops, will introduce their work, and we will have maybe some question answer with the audience to learn more from this work. For Vietnam, so Stéphane, if you can go to Vietnam, Mr. Cheyenne introduced already the Thailand WP schedule. In Vietnam, we have 2 workshops. One is from EFAO, the French School of Far East Asia, and this workshop is focused on qualitative approach and is in link with what Ruth Banomyong will explain this morning during the first plenary session. We have during this workshop number 1 field research and interview in Hanoi. Because of the pandemic, we cannot do more than that. So it will allow only the participant living in Hanoi to participate to this workshop. The other one will work in Saigon with Olivier Tessier, and from the others, they will only follow the common session online. We also have another workshop on modelization and simulation on water in the Mekong region. This workshop is led by IRD and Alexis Drogul's team. And the purpose of this workshop is to focus on how to share water in the Mekong region using the modelization and informatic tools. But not only that, they target to build some bridge between science and social science. So I think it's quite, and this workshop will be online only because people are not in Hanoi, most of them. So they will work during 5 days, every morning online, and the team from this workshop already prepared some work for the afternoon, and there will be day after day some restitution about what the participant did during the day before. About Cambodia, maybe we can have some word from Sukunti, or maybe one of a colleague of Sukunti. I know Sukunti was maybe not available this morning. I'm not sure. There's somebody from the NUM, the National University of Management.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Okay, hello, sir. Yes, I'm Lagrée from Cambodia. I'm assistant to Mrs. Sakunti. Actually, she's here with me, but she have a little bit sore throat. So now I'm come here to present some events of ASEAN Water Platform 2021 in Cambodia. Okay, so the common agenda, the common schedule, we already known, but particularly in Cambodia, on 25th February, we will have a field visit to have water operators at Lake Tamea. It's around 30 kilometers from Phnom Penh. And so we have another workshop on Saturday, 27 February. We have flooding solution from near and far by Dr. Chok Chang from National University of Management. And in the afternoon, we will have the crisis management, an introduction by Clary Guzanti and Jill Paradines from University of Nang. And we have another workshop on 1st March about introduction to urban drainage and sewage systems by Dr. Ratino Set from ITC, Cambodia, Institute of Technology of Cambodia. And we have another workshop, another training about stormwater drainage modeling system by ITC, Dr. Chun Kung. And also we have another workshop on training on Thursday, 4th March. It's about GIS introduction and elevation mapping of urban objects by Seven Marcel from IOD. So we also have IRC, Innovative Research Competition. In Cambodia, we have 6 researchers that apply the proposal. From all of them are from ITC, Institute of Technology of Cambodia. And this event is the ASEAN Water Platform 2021 in Cambodia. We have two separates. One we conduct in the hotel, and another one we will have a workshop, training workshop at National University of Management. Okay, I think that's all from Cambodia. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stéphane, for you can maybe close this program for all countries, and we can go right now to the first speaker, our colleague Ruth Banomyong. I'm personally very happy about the topic he proposed. Mr. Banomyong will talk about qualitative methodology in social science, and I think this topic is very useful, especially because, as you know, maybe we develop now it's time with modernity to develop a lot of model, etc. And we maybe forget that qualitative approaches could be very useful for not only academic staff, but also to learn more about some development project. And from our side, we developed this kind of approach in another previous project, another summer school. And I will give you some references about that after the introduction of Mr. Ruth Banomyong. So Ruth, if you hear me,
Yes.
yeah, thank you. Hello and good morning to you. I give you the floor if I can say that, and thanks to be with us this morning again.
Thank you, Stéphane, and a warm welcome to everyone. May I ask the host to record the presentation, the plenary session, because it's not recording yet. Can you please do that, or else we'll have some issues. Okay, so. Yeah, the recording is not done yet. Normally, there should be some red light blinking. Please confirm that the recording is starting. Kun Kanchana khap, at nai khap.
I think it's okay now.
It's okay? Okay.
I see, yeah, I see recording.
Yeah, now it's starting.
Red
color. So that is good. Okay. So, a warm welcome to everyone for the ASEAN Water Platform. As we say in Thailand, Sawadee Krap, as we say in Cambodia, Sorsadei, and as we say in Vietnam, Xin Chào. And as we say in France also, Bonjour. So today, it gives me great pleasure to come in and share with you some of my perspective related to the importance of qualitative methodologies in social science research. One thing that I must say is that there's a lot of confusion when we talk about qualitative research methods, when we talk about qualitative data, and quite often it is considered not as noble as those people who are working in the quantitative field or in the scientific field, because we actually don't work with numbers. I think it couldn't be further away from the truth. So my objective today is to share with you some of the key concepts related to qualitative methodologies, but what I would also like to do is to share some of the research that I've published or that I'm working on, where we use qualitative approaches in order to answer specific questions. So in terms of the agenda for this morning, I basically have about 1 hour and a half. So I'll start first with a quick introduction. I think all of my colleagues that we have been working with together in WANASEA know me, but maybe quite a few of the participants do not know me yet. So I think I need to introduce myself, but also share a bit my research area, because I feel like sometimes I'm a bit like the outlier in the WANASEA due to the research area that I'm working on. And it's true, there are some linkages, but it seems like the linkages are quite thin. Yes, there's a link, but it is quite thin. So that you understand maybe a bit better from the perspective where I come from. And then we'll go into the presentation itself with, you know, the main question: what are we talking about when we talk about qualitative research? And then I'll go into some more details in terms of qualitative data, the traditions of inquiry, how you design a qualitative study, and then I'll go, and I think that's the most interesting part for me. It's related to some of the example. I think one of the big challenge here is when you discuss research method, research paradigm, research philosophy, it is always very, very boring. And it is best illustrated with example. So let me start first with, who am I? So my name is Ruth Banomyong, and I'm currently the Dean of Thammasat Business School. It's a triple accredited school. So we have ACSB, AQUIS, and AMBA. In Thailand, we are the only one. In Southeast Asia, there are only 3 business schools that are accredited. And my term, in fact, started after I was part of WANASEA, so that gave me, I think, less time to work on WANASEA. And my research area is in logistics, supply chain management, and transport. And some of you may wonder how come I am involved. It's because in logistics, one of the key aspects of logistics is transport, and maritime transport plays a very important role in logistics. So that is my link with WANASEA. And I've been publishing and doing research in logistics, supply chain, in fact, quite a lot in the region. So let's start and have some initial discussion on what is qualitative data. What is qualitative research methods? So when we talk about qualitative research, and sometimes I don't really like this separation when people talk about qualitative versus quantitative. Because at the end of the day, when you are doing research, it's about answering a research question. I think that is the most critical part, answering the research question. But of course, when you answer the research question, there are basically two schools of thought, which is one quantitative and then the other one qualitative. And it seems like there's some sort of artificial separation where people say, oh, if you're quantitative, you should not do qualitative, or if you're qualitative, then you should not do quantitative. My take on this is, no, that is not true. Both of them are complementary, but maybe because people tend to understand numbers better, so they feel more comfortable with doing quantitative type of research. The problem is this, is when you do the quantitative research, what you realize after a while is that you end up with numbers. And true, you can say that these numbers have like statistical significance, have relationship between them. But the problem is this, is that it is very, very difficult to interpret. It is very difficult to interpret and try to make sense of what do these numbers actually mean. And that is why when we talk about qualitative research, in fact, it's this first bullet point where it says basically, yeah, we're looking at a question and we're trying to look at it from a holistic perspective. Yes, we can have numbers in qualitative research, but what we are trying to do, in fact, is to understand what is actually happening. Because from the perspective of human beings, realities are very complex, and realities can also be very different depending on the perspective that you are looking from. And that has always been a very big challenge, because we tend to see the truth in our own eye. But one of the difficulties, we also need to be aware from which perspective we observe, so that we understand the limitation of our own interpretation, our own judgment, of our own analysis. So when you use the word qualitative research, the focus is very much on the human experience itself, because the person doing the research is involved with the research, with the phenomena that is under study. And based on the approaches, you can have either participant or non-participant. Participant meaning you are part and you're totally involved in the research, or non-participant, which means that you are in fact just observing. The interpretation will be very, very different. Oh, okay. They tell me I don't need to have my microphone so close. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. So, very typically, when we look at qualitative type of research, what you notice is this, is that it always involves people, and you have to interact with them. You can interact with them from observation, from discussion, from interview, but you have to spend time with them. And that currently poses a lot of problem for researchers that are working with people. Why is that? Because you have ethics norms that now have come in, even more than in the past, where you have to ask for consent, or what we call informed consent. And when we look at consent, then again, I think this is because of the influence of the medicine field, where they do experiment on people. So even now, for us in social science, we need to get approval. We need to go through an ethic board in order to be able to talk with people. So that's where it becomes much more challenging, and we need to be aware. So anyone doing research, for example, with children, or doing research with older people that may have, I'm sorry to say, a bit of Alzheimer or a bit sick, then that becomes very, very difficult, because they cannot give you the informed consent. So when we look at qualitative research and we look at the researcher becomes a mean to collect the data. The researcher becomes a tool to collect the data. And how you do that is that you need to be able to develop strategies. And you have many different types of strategies. Like I've said a few moments ago, we can do like participant observation. So you are part of that specific research phenomena that you are studying. But it can also be through the means of doing interviews. Interviews is the most common approach when we think of qualitative research. However, interviews can be very, very different. We tend to talk about in-depth interview, where you try to explore and understand the perspective of the respondent. And you can also have unstructured interviews, where these unstructured interviews are usually done under a specific theme, and you have basically a discussion to explore, to probe the answer of the respondents. But you can also have structured interviews. So interviews are the most common way, but the type of data that you get back from interviews can be very different. And the data that you get tends to be quite descriptive. And I think this is where people are struggling in terms of interpreting the data that is collected, because they tend to be descriptive, usually they're narrative, so it means that it is telling a story. It is telling a story from the person who has an opinion or who has been involved in a particular situation that you want to know about. So from this, I think this is the main starting point, is qualitative research is in fact a lot more challenging than doing what we call quantitative research. And the reason for that is because the researcher has to be involved with the research phenomena that is under study. How involved? That means he becomes the research tool in that specific research. So what are the types of the qualitative research methods that we can use? There are basically three main types. And this is just to help us go quickly over some of these data collection approaches. The first one are, of course, the interviews. This is the most common method that is used when we refer to qualitative research. And the challenge is this, is that you cannot just go into an interview without having what we call protocols. And these protocols will help us guide the interview, the discussion. What is the direction that we want? Of course, in an interview, what you would like is you would like to have flexibility, because the respondent may have a totally different idea from you. So it's about shaping the discussion, and I'm not using the word control, but it's about guiding and probing the respondent in the way how they can answer the specific question or the specific themes that you have in mind. What we tend to ask about in an interview, it's about the respondent's experience. It's about the respondent opinions, their perception, their feeling, their knowledge about a specific particular topic. And when you collect such kind of data, it is basically words. It is basically words, quotes, that you have to take as verbatim, because you cannot paraphrase, because these are the words that they have said. But you need to be able to interpret these words. What do these words mean? And that's where it's the most challenging when you are working on qualitative data. You have to interpret them. You have to understand the meaning behind. Why is it that they are giving this opinion? Why is it that they're explaining this particular phenomenon, or the reason behind these phenomena? So interviews are probably one of the great ways, but you have to be trained to do interview. What you notice with young researchers when they start doing their interview is, one, it's the approach, because you have to break the ice with the respondent. You have to be able to develop trust. He needs to be willing to talk to you and share his ideas with you. And I will show you some of the challenges that I've been faced with when I was doing some of my research by using these type of qualitative tools. Then the second type of tools that will enable us to get data from a qualitative research perspective are observation. And I find observations very, very interesting. Why is that? Because in an observation, as the name says, you are observing a specific research phenomenon. But there are many ways on how you can observe. Like I've said a few moments ago, you can observe from the perspective of being a participant. You want to know why. You want to know why this particular behavior is happening. You become involved in it. You take part in it. So that is one way. But if you do it that way, there is a risk. And what is that risk? It's a risk that we call of going native. What does going native mean? Is that you become so involved with the research that you are doing that you have in fact become one of them. And because you have become one of them, you cannot actually reflect upon what is happening. But you will understand very well, because you are part of that specific research phenomenon. On the other hand, you have non-participant, right? And in non-participant, you observe from afar. You are not involved in the research phenomenon, which is good because you maintain your integrity as a researcher. But the problem is this: because you are not involved, you will interpret what is happening in that research phenomena based on your own interpretation, based on your own paradigms or the way how you look at the world. And you may not understand why are they doing that? Why is this particular phenomenon happening? So you always have limitations. In fact, with all research methods, you have limitation. With interviews, you have limitation. With observation, you have limitations. And what is critical is you have so many different limitations that doing good research, the first thing you need to know is what are the limitations of the research method that you are using. Because if you do not know the limitation, then it becomes very difficult to explain. It becomes very challenging to be aware of where are the shortcomings of the research that you are doing. And when we talk about research method, this is the most common and the most normal approach is that you tend to go back to the method that you are the most comfortable with, the most familiar with. I work with a lot of engineers, research field, and it is true. They tend to go back very often on modeling, modelization, doing simulation, having lots of numbers, which is fine, but it cannot provide the full picture. Or when I work with some social scientists, their approach is very much based on interpreting the situation, but what is missing is some sort of scientific approach that could be replicated and be more recognized by our peers. And this is a problem when we are social scientists. Because we use the word social and we also use the word scientist. So what does that mean? It means that we try to be as scientific as possible. We try to copy, in fact, the scientific tradition. But what happened is that because we are looking at social issues, quite a lot of our approaches or interpretation is very different from the scientific way of thinking. So we are a bit like in between. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I am just saying that they are different. And because they are different, we need to be aware as researchers of both sides of the coin. If the research question requires predominantly a quantitative approach, then we have to take a quantitative approach. If the research question requires a qualitative approach, then we have to take a qualitative approach. But at the end of the day, you cannot avoid. You need to be able to conduct both sides of the coin. And when we look at the documents here, this is based on the secondary data. What are the existing documents and how do you actually interpret those documents? You can also interpret pictures, you can interpret photographs, you can even interpret based on the correspondence, the letters that people have been writing to each other. And of course, you always need to understand the context. And maybe this is what is difficult, is that in any type of qualitative research, you need to understand the context of the research. Because when it is taken out of that context, these are just words, these are just pictures that we cannot actually understand or interpret. So this is something that is very, very important as a starting point. Is we talk about interviews as a mean of collecting data. We talk about observation as a mean of collecting data. We look at document as a mean of collecting data, but that data will not make sense if you do not understand the context. And that is also valid for quantitative data. You may have numbers, but at the end of the day, for you to be able to interpret those numbers, you need to have a clear understanding of the context in which the data has been collected. So this is something that is very important as a starting point when we look at qualitative research in terms of the means. So when we look at the type of the qualitative traditions, there are so many different ways. And here I'm just showing you some example. I'm just showing you some example of what can be done. The first one is biography, such as life history, oral history. And here what we do is we try to study a person. We try to study a person, we try to study that person's experience, and it can start from what has been written about this person. And we tend to be very interested in the history of famous people, a life history. And it's quite popular for people, when they become famous, to have biographies. The challenge with the biography is this, is that if someone's still living write their own biography, it will be from their perspective. And you might have other data that may show us a different angle. So it's always very, very challenging. It is always very challenging. But these biographies not only tell you about the life story of a person, but could also and can also explain to you the context where that person, was living, the life that he was living, and that context could also explain some of the decision that he has taken. Oral history is another way of also collecting and doing qualitative research, is that you interview people that were involved in a particular phenomenon at a particular moment in time to understand from various perspectives of what actually happened. So the duty of the researcher is not just to get the perspective of one person, but it is to get not only the perspective from many persons, but also to collect as much data, as much archives as possible. Archival data as much as possible related to the context, related to the person. And then the writer can then provide his interpretation, his analysis of the rationale or the reasoning behind certain decision made by that person. And to share with you, I've had a PhD student who did a study on border trade, doing the trading across two borders. And he did a study of border trade between two countries, which was Thailand and Laos, between Nong Khai and Vientiane. And one of the methods he used was biography, because his research was mostly qualitative. And he did a biography, and this approach was called A Day in the Life. So basically following a group of persons during 24 hours. Because his research topic was related to the border trade, he was very interested in the border traders, so the people who goes across the border from Laos to Thailand, buy things in Thailand, and then go back and sell it in Laos. And that approach, A Day in the Life, is very challenging, because he had to negotiate access. Can I follow you for a day? Can I see what you do for a day? From the morning in Laos, collecting the orders from the various shops, going across the border, buying in Thailand, and then bringing it back. So it's a day in the life. And those that accepted him, he just tagged along. So he was a non-participant observer. But his role was to collect the data, what was actually happening in one day. And he did that for a number of border traders. And after about 20-something, he stopped. And the reason why he stopped, because he arrived at what we call saturation point, basically meaning it was basically the same thing. Everyone behaved in a similar manner. So in a sense, by using this a life in a day, biography, life history type of approach, he was able to actually get a good understanding of what was happening in a full day in the life of a border trader. And that is very interesting because he could understand some of the, not only the operational aspect, but also some of the rationale behind some of the decision taken after, with a debrief, a discussion with the border trader. So that's the first tradition. The second tradition uses a word that I would say is a bit, might looks a bit complicated, and it is phenomenology. What is phenomenology? Here I've written it, it's a lived experience. So it's about interpretativism, and it's about to look at the experience, right? The meaning of the lived experience about a concept or phenomenon by several individuals. There's a quick reference here by Mustakas, where he says, phenomenology is to determine what an experience means for the persons who have had the experience and are able to provide a comprehensive description of it. So that means the person had to go through the experience and had to be able to reflect upon that experience. What did they gain? What did they learn from that experience? And from these individual descriptions, general or universal meanings are derived, in other words, the essence of the structure of the experience itself. So for phenomenology, you look at the people who has gone through a particular experience and you want to extract what actually happened during that experience. Were there any structure? Were there any theories that could be induced or interpreted based on those deductions? The third one is, I think, what is very common when you read a lot of PhDs or a lot of research is grounded theory. When you do research, you always need to have a theoretical foundation. And for those who follow the qualitative tradition, grounded theory seems to be one of the most popular theoretical foundations. And what is grounded theory? Grounded theory is that you are trying to propose a theory. You're going to try to propose a theory based on what has been observed empirically. Right? So that is the idea. You're trying to propose. And how do you develop grounded theory is trying to talk, trying to understand better in terms of the research that has been, that you want to study. So usually grounded theory is very, very helpful when there's not a lot of knowledge related to a specific topic. If there is a lot of knowledge, that means that there are already some paradigms in place. There are already some theoretical foundation in place. But if it is a topic that hasn't been really studied, then grounded theory is usually very useful because it is a very good starting point. Normally, you have a question, and in contrast to more positivist approach, the idea is not to do a literature review in the beginning. The idea is to talk to people. And maybe you have to revisit, you have to go back. But the idea is to talk to people, quite a lot of people, to try to understand what is their perspective on that specific research phenomena that you are looking at. And what is quite challenging is you do the interpretation of the data at the same time that you are collecting it. And that is always not very easy. And like I did, like my PhD student did, is that you have to go until you reach saturation. When you reach saturation, that means that the research phenomena and the study or the topic that you're interested in, there seems to be a consensus related to that phenomena. And with this, you can start to review. You can start to look at some of the category. You can look at some sort of typology. You can look at some of the themes. And then from there, you can start developing proposition, hypothesis if you wanted, if there are any relationship. But of course, always understand the context. So the starting point when you're looking at it from the perspective of grounded theory is you do not start with any theoretical foundation. You let the data that you have collected infer the theories, or at least guide you in the direction where the research could go. So it is very much an inductive approach. It is a key inductive approach that is usually done at the starting point of any research, especially when you're doing exploratory research. You try to get a better sense. Don't do the literature yet, just to check, just to see if this topic or this question that you have can lead to further research down the road. So in fact, you should never look at research as something that is linear, but more as something that feeds into some sort of a loop, where from inductive, we can go to deductive. And after deductive, we go back to inductive. And inductive tends to be more qualitative, whereas deductive tends to be more quantitative. Then another tradition is to look at ethnography. And that has been, very much questioned from the perspective of many quantitative researchers saying, hey, ethnography, how serious is that? Well, it is very serious when you want to understand the behavior of a group, the behavior of a community, and to understand why they behave in a particular manner. I think at the moment, what we would be very interested in, if you look at the case of Thailand and Myanmar, is we really want to understand the group behavior of the army. Why do they think like this? And I don't think you can do that with a quantitative survey, right? You need to be able to go in, understand the context, understand the mindset, and probably to really understand, you have to be part of that group. So here you have a lot of field work, and you have to work with what we call key informants. These are the people that are within the group, but that can provide good answers. What do we mean by good answers? Is that they can understand the rationale behind some of the decision, some of their behavior, not just explaining, oh, it is like this, because it is like this, or it has always been like this. Every decision has a rationale. The question is, are you aware? Can you reflect upon that rationale? And when you collect the data, you need to describe as much as possible. And this is what we call a thick description. Thick meaning you need to have a lot of data inside. Because the richness of qualitative is really in how much detail, how descriptive is the data that you have. And when you are looking at ethnography, there are basically two sides of that coin. One is emic, which means that it's a perspective from inside, the perspective from the people inside, and etic, which is from the researcher's perspective on how he interprets the social life of the group and the study. And you always have to have these two sides in order to really do a good ethnographic study. So, same again here. If you notice, one of the recurring theme that I always highlight in this particular discussion is the context. Context, 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 being able to have a holistic view, because if you do not have that, it's very, very difficult and almost impossible to do qualitative research. You can use qualitative method, but then it becomes very difficult to do the interpretation. And that is why if you decide to go on the perspective of doing ethnographic approach, then you need to have some knowledge from the anthropology. So again, it shows that anthropology can help you better understand what is happening when you're doing ethnography. Okay. But there are always challenges. And in ethnography, it takes a lot of time to collect data. And I'm not sure if you heard, but today, because of the internet, you also have something that we call nethnography. So we follow a group on the internet. So that's nethnography. Currently, I think it's been a week now, Clubhouse in Thailand is very, very popular. And because Clubhouse is popular, now the government is a bit afraid. Anything that's new, they are afraid. But what I find fascinating, if you look at it from the eyes of a researcher, is that it would be very interesting to understand, why do they go into Clubhouse? Why do they select to go in specific room? And why do they want to moderate? Why do they want to share their perspective? I think Clubhouse, one of the reasons why Clubhouse is successful at the moment is because of the COVID, because people want to talk, they want to interact, but they cannot meet. So some of my colleagues are saying, let's see, because if the COVID situation improves and people can meet face-to-face with the vaccine and everything, then the usefulness of Clubhouse will disappear. So ethnography, don't think about just, oh, you're just looking at the people and the behavior, but it can also be done on the internet, and that is called ethnography. And then you can incorporate archival documents, you can incorporate quantitative data. One of the big challenge, like in the biography, like in ethnography, you tend to write a story. And if you write a story, you may get a PhD, but you may not, or it will be very, very difficult to get published, which is another problem, because depending on the tradition of the journal, certain journals do not accept qualitative type research, which is very sad, because they consider and they say, oh, this is not serious research. That is not true. It's really about understanding, because if you actually do qualitative research, tell you the truth, it's a lot more difficult than doing quantitative research. Last but not the least, in terms of the tradition, is a case study. And I am myself a big proponent of the case study. Why is that? Because I feel that the case study can explain a specific situation quite well. And when you do a case study, you have different types of case study. It can be firm case study, but it can also be a geographical case study. And when we talk about firm case study, it can be multiple cases. It doesn't have to be just one case. What is very important in a case study, and this is case study research, and this is very different than case study that you use, to teach, what we call teaching cases. In a case study research, the key word is it has to be replicable. So that means that the research method that is being used, is clearly explained. And if someone else would do a similar case study, they could follow it because the research methods are transparent. So we're looking at a particular phenomenon within a setting. And you can use different research methods. You can use secondary data, archival data. You can use observations. You can use interviews, but you can also use surveys. You can also use simulation. So in fact, you can use many different types of research method that are both qualitative and quantitative at the same time. And this is why there is so much misconception with the case study. And when you start having multiple cases, what you can do is use those multiple cases for theory building. But it's because we have, because we did a very clear delimitation of the scope of the case, that is why we call it a case study. So for me, and I think this is something that is quite useful for young researchers, but for young researchers is having this case study approach is very, very helpful. Okay, so the next point that I want to share is about designing a qualitative study. So when we design a qualitative study, it's always, you start first with a problem statement or a statement of the need for the study. So basically talking about the rationale. In a qualitative type of study, you don't have a hypothesis because you're not trying to deduct. You are in fact inducting. You are in fact inducting, and you can develop immediately some sort of research question. It's not fixed in stone. Some people say you need to do a literature. Some people say just start with grounded theory. No right or wrong here. It's about the research topic. But what is very important is when you have an observation and you have a question, is the first question that you need to ask yourself is how much is known about that specific topic. And when you decide to set your research question should be not too broad and not too specific. Here you have example of two research questions that are very, very broad. First one, does Buddhism account for the patience that seems to dominate the Thai worldview? How do you actually answer? There's probably, you need at least 4 or 5 smaller, more specific research questions to help you answer that part. Or how do leaders make the decision? You probably need 3 or 4 research questions just to be able to help scope this broad question. Here are some examples of qualitative questions. What do people in this setting have to know in order to do what they are doing? So let's imagine this example. In Thailand, this is very popular. I'm not sure if this is very popular in Cambodia or in Vietnam. Is that in Thailand, British football, Premiership football, is very, very popular. It's very much followed. But one of the reasons why it is very popular is not because they like football. Well, they might like it a bit, but it's because they like to bet on the football matches. But the problem is betting in Thailand is forbidden. It's against the law. So if you say, oh, you want to know how people that follow the football, how do they bet? It becomes very difficult. Can you send them a questionnaire and ask them to answer? Not so sure. And even if you get a question, the response from them, will you actually understand why are they involved in this? Why are they involved in betting? Why do they follow the Premiership? Probably not. Can you do a non-participant observation very difficult because you just see their behavior in terms of betting. So what you need to do is you have to get involved. So you have to get involved with them. I'm not saying that you have to bet as much as them, but probably you need to get that experience in order to understand this context and why people are actually betting on football matches. And then you can go into, what are the stories that can be told from these experiences? And what are the themes, what are the contexts that can account for the experiences? So you see here, it's about looking at a particular phenomenon and then trying to understand what it is. But it still has to be specific enough so that you, from the question, you know what type of qualitative method can be used to help answer your research question. So when you do qualitative research, and again, I think it's because sometimes we are afraid that that we need numbers, and we think about sampling. The first rule of thumb in qualitative research is no probability sampling. You do not need a sample size that represents your sample population because you want to tell a story. And if you want to represent the population, it's also easy because you just go through this concept of saturation. If everyone starts saying or behaving the same way, you know it will be valid for the whole population. But what is challenging in the sampling is the unit of analysis. The people, the firm, the institution, what is the unit of analysis that you are trying to study? Is it a whole community? Like the people that are betting on the football matches? And then you can go into the details, because you can also have a feminist perspective and then just want to look at gender, looking at it from the feminist perspective. This is quite popular also in qualitative research. Or you want to look at it from the perspective of specific ethnic group, or you can look at older, younger generation. Today we talk about Gen Z, the millennials, and everyone is complaining about them, right? So it's quite purposive. It doesn't have to be representative. So all of those, sampling, probability, calculation method, you don't need them. You don't need them when you are doing sampling for qualitative research. And like I was referring to a few moments ago, is that the researcher is the instrument. The researcher is the instrument. In quantitative research, the researcher is the one who analyzes, who collects the data, but he is not the instrument of the research. And when you are the instrument, it is you who are responsible for the field notes, taking the notes, recording, which you always have to ask the permission to record, the video, the photographic data, all this you need to have informed consent. But informed consent does not have to be at the beginning of the research. Why is that? It's because if the respondent or the subject that you're trying to study is aware that he is being recorded or he is being photographed, his behavior will change. His behavior will change. So it can be done after. Say, okay, I have a video of you. This is your behavior. Can I use it? And that you ask for informed consent after. It can be done. It can be done after. It doesn't have to be done before all the time if you believe that the recording will affect the behavior of the person or the phenomenon under study. And all the interviews that you do, they must be transcribed. They must be transcribed verbatim. And the analysis will be based on what has been written. So, how do you analyze the data? Well, you analyze at the same time as you do the data collection. And that is why, from the perspective of the positivist, from a quantitative perspective, it's very difficult to understand, because it means that it keeps on changing. The interpretation keeps on changing based on the data that has been collected. And that is why they don't feel comfortable, because they say, hey, that is not very scientific. But the reality is this: it's a story. You're trying to explain a specific journey, understand a specific situation, and you are describing it and you are analyzing it at the same time. And while you are analyzing it at the same time, when you have the transcripts, that's when you start to organize the data. You read all the data, you try to get a sense of the whole. From a quantitative analysis, today we talk about big data analytics. There's lots of numbers, and then you try to find patterns. Well, it's the same thing for qualitative research. It's the same thing. You try to find patterns in the answers. You try to find patterns in the word that they use. How many times do they use a specific word? In certain types of research, they also measure the time it takes for the person to answer. And that's where you can go in and start coding for recurring themes, for recurring categories, code the data, try to find patterns, and you can also label that data and looking for emergent pattern. And this is why it's very interesting, because even in qualitative research, you can use software such as NVivo to come in and analyze the pattern. In social science, when we do quantitative analysis, well, I would say when we do statistical analysis, we use software. If it's not complicated, we use Excel. A bit more complicated, we use SPSS or AMOS or ListRel. In social science, in qualitative research, we also have software such as NVivo that looks at the pattern of the word, helps you identify themes, helps you identify relationships between certain words. So qualitative analysis doesn't need to be just a person doing the analysis, but it can be done through a software also. So let me go now into some examples so that you can see the type of research that can be done. And I'll share you 3 research that has already been published, and then one that I'm revising at the moment with my team. But I found it very interesting in terms of the journey itself. So the first story that I want to share with you, it's a paper that's been published, I think, 20 years ago now. So it's a very old paper. In fact, this was my first publication. It was published in a journal called International Journal of Physical Distribution and Logistics Management, so specifically in my field. And the research that I was looking at was multimodal transport or door-to-door transport. And I used a case study approach. Right? Remember qualitative methods? One of the tradition is to use a case study. So in this case, it is a geographical case study. It is a geographical case study, and I tried to look at Laotian garment exporters. So the story is this, and that was, my initial observation. In fact, this was part of my PhD. My initial observation was this: Lao PDR is a landlocked country. As a landlocked country, one of the big challenges is access to the sea. And Lao PDR, as a landlocked country, has a number of alternatives. Can go through Vietnam, can go through, Cambodia, can go through Thailand, and even can go through Myanmar, because now there's a bridge there that links. So there are a number of options. And what I was interested in knowing is, one, what were the options? And two, what were the costs involved? Because at the end of the day, it is important for these exporters to be able to sell the product. So if one of the options is expensive, more expensive than the other, then that will make the goods less competitive. Okay, so that was like the initial idea. The problem is this. Problem is, okay, but how do I explain this? How do I visualize all of this? So what I did, with the help of my supervisor, her name is here, Anthony Beresford, this is what I did. We've developed a conceptual model. So this is a modeling aspect. This is a modeling aspect. And this is taken from classic transport economics theory, where we developed this two-dimension model, where on the vertical axis, you have the cost, and then on the horizontal axis, you have the distance itself. And what we're trying to represent in this particular model is what happens from door to door. What happens from origin to the final destination with the unloading. So what you notice in this particular figure, in this particular model, is that there is a representation of each mode of transport. Road, rail, sea, inland waterway, road, blah, blah, whatever. And what you notice is you have a steepness. A steepness meaning the cost increase over distance for each mode of transport. And that steepness, that angle will be different depending on the mode of transport and depending on the distance itself. What is also interesting in this particular model is a vertical step. Okay, so let me show you an example of the vertical step. And here, what does a vertical step mean? It means that there is an increase in the cost, but the goods are not moving anywhere. And that increase can be because of a change in transport mode, from road to rail, from rail to sea, but it can also be because the goods are stuck at the border and waiting to go across. So you have to pay certain fees, and then what happens is the goods are stuck there until everything has been paid, and then you can move the goods afterward. So conceptually, this is the research I wanted to do. I had a model. This is what we call the theoretical model, the conceptual model, and then I needed to have empirical data. I needed to have data that has been collected. So let's look at the next slide, the next animation. Okay. So because this is a geographical case study, my origin is Vientiane. My origin is Vientiane, and then I go to Rotterdam, which is the main entry point into Europe. So as you can see from the picture, there's quite a number of alternatives that you can use to go to Rotterdam. So one is via Vietnam here, via Da Nang, then via Thailand. We didn't put in the case of Cambodia or Myanmar because at the time when I did research, 2000, these were the actual routes. So it wasn't theoretical routes, but it was the actual routes that could be used for export from Laos. We didn't look at it from a theoretical perspective. We tried to look at it from an empirical perspective. And in order to develop the model, this is what I had to do. I had to collect data from the industry, from the people who are actually moving the goods. And here what we see is an example from Vientiane to Rotterdam, through Lam Chabang port in Thailand, how long the mode of transport, the transit time, the distance, the cost, and then there's a confidence index, which I will explain a few moments later. So here, you have data that is secondary, that is in fact actual empirical data, such as the distance. Transit time comes from interview. Cost comes from interview. And then the confidence index comes from the survey. So basically, we're asking a perception. On a scale of 1 to 5, what do you think about that specific leg or that specific activity? How reliable is it? So it's a questionnaire in that sense. So for example, for the cost, it's one respondent. It's not an average because that's the only data we could get. But then for the confidence index, it was an average, right? So this is just an example. And this type of data, if you ask me, we talk about qualitative, quantitative. Yeah, but some of the data is actual data. So how can you say it's qualitative? But it's a way how you use that data. It's a way how you use that data if you want to say this is qualitative research. And when we have the data, what we do after this is we input the data to draw the model. We input the data to draw the model. And here, what you see is an example based on that table that you have seen, what happens. So you see that the distance from Vientiane to Lam Chabang, Bangkok is quite short, about 700 kilometers, but it is very expensive from a transport perspective. Then after that, you have the maritime leg, the sea leg, the transshipment in Singapore, and then up to the final destination in Rotterdam. So you have a representation from origin to destination. And the next step is you do the analysis. You do the analysis related to the challenges in terms of road transport, what are the issues, how much money, is there any under-table T money that has to be paid? All of these things then can be discussed. And some people have said, well, this thesis, this research is qualitative. Is it really qualitative? Because I'm also using actual numbers. So this is where there's a lot of confusion, and this is where I say, when you do research, sometimes having this separation in mind of these two, oh yes, you can either do qualitative or quantitative research, that's not such a good idea. That's not such a good idea, because at the end of the day, you need to use the approach that suits your research question. But here I was able to collect the data through surveys, through questionnaires, through interviews. And with this, I was able to build and develop the graph, and I had to interpret it. But everything, the theoretical foundation was based on transport economics, on the competition between modes of transport, which is highly quantitative. So here, it is one example. So this is my first example. Let me share with you my second example. My second example is an article that was written in 2008 and was published in a journal called the International Journal of Production Economics. Ooh. So production economics, the first thing that we think of is econometrics, a lot of Greek numbers, and they tend to be in their own world. But strangely enough, they accepted this paper, which talks about the implication of deregulation and liberalization on the logistics service industry in Lao PDR. Again, this is a case study. This is a case study on that is related to Lao PDR, and we're looking at deregulation, and we're looking at liberalization. So what did we do? We've used an inductive approach because little is known about the situation in Lao PDR. We're not very clear. We know a bit about liberalization, but we're not very clear. And this is what we started with when we've, and this is what is written in that specific journal article. First thing that I talk about is access to data. How do you get access to data? If you look at a lot of research that looks at deregulation, liberalization, they tend to develop econometrics model and then simulate what would happen when the market has been liberalized. That's a traditional way of looking at it. But it doesn't reflect, one, the context, because it's a simulation. It doesn't reflect the context, and it cannot give you the perspective of the people involved in the deregulation itself. You know, the policymakers, the private sector, all those that either have to suffer or to take advantage of that liberalization. So in that paper, this is what I explained first, is that access to the data in the region is difficult. And the key phrase is this. And remember this for all of those of you who are in the region, when you are collecting data. We all know the methods to collect data. We have all read from the similar textbook. But this is what I want to say. It is not just about research methods and data collection technique. This is something that everyone can read about, can learn about. But it is more about, one, who you are when you're trying to collect data, who you are first. Then secondly is, who do you know? Any connection, any network. And how much do the respondent trust you? Because you're going to meet with them, you're going to talk with them. Will the respondent trust you? If they don't trust you, they might not speak, or they will be very brief in the discussion. And this is a highlight. This is particularly true with government officials. I was talking about liberalization, so I had to speak with officials from Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Commerce, and all these things. So it is particularly true with government officials who needs to be very careful when providing data or offering their perspective. And sometimes you have what we call the official party line. This is what the government is saying, so all the government officers need to say the same thing, and then their own personal perspective based on the official government perspective. So this is something that you need to be very, very aware. So it's very context specific, which cannot be reflected when you do simulation, which cannot even be reflected when you are doing a large-scale survey, because at the end of the day, you don't really know what those people are thinking when they are answering your survey. Let me continue. So I talk in my method section about the interview format. So because I was talking with government officers, I didn't want to guide them too much. I wanted really to hear from them. So it was like more open and structured interview. But under the same theme, that theme of liberalization, that theme of deregulation. And this is very useful because it's quite a sensitive subject, talking about liberalization, opening up. And when you're talking with government officers, you can also consider this as what we call elite interview. Elite interview means you are, in fact, interviewing someone that has a higher position than you. And what you have to be very careful is, when you are interviewing someone that has a higher position than you, very often you cannot control. You cannot control the discussion. So you have to let it go. That's why unstructured is good. but it's about reminding and trying to bring it back into the area that you are interested in. What I also want to say is sometimes what they do not say mean a lot. When you ask certain questions, they don't answer. Not answering also means something. And when we talk about a lead respondent, you have to be able to negotiate access. Access to them. One, they don't have a lot of time. Two, they want to know, why do you want to talk to me? Can I trust you? Can you send me the questions in advance? I want to know. Right? So these are the things that you have to prepare when you are trying to negotiate access for them. Even sometime, what I had to do was organize a dinner meeting. And in that dinner meeting, discuss with them because it's less formal. But the discussion is very different from the beginning when people were still a bit serious, and then at the end of the dinner because they had a bit too much wine to drink, and then they start talking a lot. So yeah, you need to have many ways of collecting data, but that's not very ethical because the informed consent might not be there because they're already half drunk. Okay. So for us in that particular, so I'm not going to talk about the result, but here I really wanted to focus on the method and this discussion is because we want to have the fullest opportunity for views and values. So we have themes, we have issues that we want them to discuss. If it's not clear, then it has to be clarified. So very often we need to look at definitions because we may use the same word, but the understanding may be different. And it's a role of the interviewer to probe. So that means to entice them to talk. You know, why is it like this? What is your reaction based on this particular event? The market is going to open. What do you think will happen? And it will always be the same broad topic, the same issues that will be discussed. But the weight of the detail will be different depending on the person answering. But what is very important is that the respondents needs to have a lot of liberty. That means don't try to control them. Let them talk. Let them think. And then after that, they may say, please do not quote me, and then you have to comply with that request. So that was my second example of published research. Here, another paper where we've looked at the role of philanthropy in humanitarian supply chain, and again, it's a case study. It's a case study. So here, in the case study, what we've tried to do is and discuss again is here I'm giving you a bit more example in terms of methodology, looking at case study research, because it allows researchers to explore real life experiences in real world situations. And it's really about understanding things that are new. And when you're trying to make sure what you're studying makes sense and the unit makes sense, a single case study is more than enough. After that, you can do multiple case studies in order to develop, further theories, so on and so forth. So a single case study tends to be very much in-depth, but the qualitative methods that you use, can be replicated, and we can use multiple sources of data in order to increase the validity of the case study. So here, this specific paper, I really explain the method of case study research. And what we ended up with was this, which is a kind of a roadmap for strategic philanthropy in humanitarian supply chain through a number of interviews. So these are examples, and I just want to share with you before I open the floor for question and answer. This is something I've been working on this weekend, right? So I'm currently working on a paper on a method on how to calculate national logistics costs per GDP, right? So it's a macro, it's an economic type of paper, and it's in a journal called Transport Policy. But in terms of the research method, the way how we presented the story is we use action research. What does that mean, action research? Action research is a kind of a case study research where the researcher is part of the research team and also influence the results. And that is called action research. And in my case was, I influenced the result because the government, the Thai government, have used the method that I've developed, has used the numbers that I've calculated. So can you really say this is qualitative or quantitative? The actual calculation is totally quantitative. But the way how I explain how the research was done is qualitative, right? So don't try to artificially separate them in your mind because you need to do both. And hopefully, fingers crossed, this paper will be published, hopefully, by the end of the year, will be accepted and published. So that's what I hope. Will I get to there? This is my fifth revision on that paper. So with this, I think I would like to end my plenary, and we have about like 15 minutes. We have about 15 minutes for question and answers. The floor is open. And time for some coffee.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you deserve. Thank you very much, Ruth, for this very rich and clear and useful, I will say, introduction on a qualitative research and approach. For me, I have one question and maybe one comment, but I don't want to talk a lot because I prefer that the all participants interfere and talk with you. Don't you think that, Ruth, don't you think that one of the main barriers to develop qualitative approach is time consuming? Because as you mentioned and underline, it's also a question of to know with who you have to develop the survey, the trust, how people can trust you. And usually I remember when I make a qualitative survey in Vietnam, I need to meet several times the same house or the same person, because the first time it was difficult to share information with me, and I think it's an important point maybe to underline is this tools we need to use to put people in to be more confident, to trust with what you are doing. This is my question.
Okay, well, this is what you need to look at, is that if you are starting your PhD, of course, using a qualitative approach will take a lot of resources, a lot of time, and you might not finish in time. But when you are a researcher working in a specific field, what happens is that over time, you are able to build trust with the people you keep on working or keep on interacting with, because that is your area. So I would say it also depends on what stage you are in your career. I'm sure now today, like Stéphane and myself, when we go and see certain people in certain ministries, they've seen us for the past 10 years already. So they understand what we want, and we can talk. But then if it's the first time we meet someone, this is all about developing the relationship, how you break the ice, how you enable the trust to occur. And that's probably one of the most challenging, because you need to have a lot of social skills to be able to talk. Because many researchers sometimes are very good at doing research, but don't have the social skills to interact with people, and then that makes them go back within themselves, and then they prefer to work with numbers because at least they don't have to develop relationship with numbers.
Thank you very much, Ruth. The second point, it's only one comment I want to share with the audience. I just sent to everybody a link. In addition, with what Ruth Banomyong explained this morning, it's you will find a lot maybe of publication about qualitative and quantitative approaches. But this paper, I hope, could be useful because he's talking about the complementarity about this both approach, and is why I share with you. And in this website, the TAMDAO-Conf website, you will also find some chapter, some paper about qualitative tools we have to use and to understand more about tension, conflict, about different topic as forest deforestation or land grabbing, etc. It's just to share information. It's okay for me. Please, if you have any comment or question to Ruth, you are more than welcome.
Hello.
Please, questions and comments. I know it's not easy because we're all online like this.
Hello, everyone. My name is...
Can we ask for a question from each country?
Yeah, at least. And do not forget to do not mute your microphone.
Yeah. Hello, Ajahn. Good morning, everyone. I'm a student. My name is Thuy Ong from RCSCM. This is student. Just Ajahn, you mentioned about the qualitative research methodology, and this part is very useful, and I agree that what you have mentioned. And then what my challenge is that when I collecting my data as a researcher, so I saw that what I challenge is that sometimes I have to change my question before I go to when I arrive at the field trip, because sometimes, because even though I arrange my question before I trip, but actually when I arrive at the field, look at my field size, sometimes the condition is a little bit different. So that's why I understand that the qualitative research is the generating hypothesis. So how can you advise me that how can we adjust my purpose of research, doing research in that area relevant with my my research aim and question especially. So how can we adjust this kind of challenges? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a reality, is that things tend not to follow what we think. You know, when you prepare your research, you have an idea, it is going to be like this, and you have your research question, then you have your interview protocols, and in your mind, you know, you say, this is what is going to happen. One thing I've learned with doing research is that it never happens. It never happens the way you think, the way you plan. And this is why at the start of the research, when you're starting the research project, be it a PhD or any research project, it is very important to be sure that we have identified the right issue, the right topic, the right content. And this is where maybe a grounded theory approach would be useful, is that you will talk with a number of people. So just to clarify, and also looking at the type of questions that can be asked or that people feel that is part of the topic that you are trying to study. What I'm saying to you is this, is that if you use that approach, then you will have less surprises. You have less surprise that further down the road of the research, you will have answers that will go in totally different direction. But if your research, you have already prepared your protocols, and you are in fact actually going to the field work, Then the question I have to ask is this part of the pilot or is this part of the actual data collection? Because normally at the pilot stage, that will already be highlighted in terms of the way how some of the people answers differently. But it is also true that when you're collecting data, you always have outliers. So the question is this, this person that you're talking to that is not answering in the direction that you think he should answer, is he an outlier? If he's an outlier, then you can take him out later on if you have data from other people. So I think it also depends on the stage where you are. Are you just starting the research? Is it part of the pilot, starting the research just to get a clearer scope of what you're trying to study? Or is it part of the pilot? Or is it during the actual data collection? So I hope I've been able to answer your question. And then I have another question from Kenyang University, sorry. So it's about the size of the sample and the way of choosing sample when conducting research on gender. Okay. I'm doing a project on gender role in wetland management. So how many sample is enough? And what is the best way to select the sample? I have to go back to what is your research question? Because the research question will determine what is the data that you need. And if you are using, I'm using the word if here. If you are using a qualitative approach to answer the research question, to do the research, you might not be too bothered with the sampling. You can just collect data from, if it's gender issue, just women, or both sides if you want. But then you do it until you have saturation, so the behavior patterns are similar. Having more people doesn't add much more to the behavior, and that is enough. So that will be my theoretical answer to you, but of course it depends on what is exactly your research question. So hope I've answered your question, Dongbe.
Well, I think that maybe he wants to finish the question. Zung Betang from Kindan University. Would you like to, complete the question, or is it okay for you?
Can I ask the question?
Yes.
1 second, please,
okay.
because he wants to finish the question from Zung Betang from Kindan University, please. Thank you.
Yes, my research question is try to finding the role of the woman and between the woman and the man in conducting some activity in wetland. So what I'm trying to figure out who play the role more important. For example, the woman or the man will play more important role in conducting some activity like catching fish or explore natural resources. That is the first and the most important question in my research.
Okay, so if I were you, right, and I had this research question, I would say this. I would do the research like this. One part of the research needs to be quantitative, probably with survey, and then using statistical analysis such as ANOVA to look at the difference between the two groups, between the men and the women, to see if there's any statistical difference in terms of the difference in terms of activities related to wetland. So that will be one part. Then the second part for me would be to do some interviews, probably based on those people that are very active in wetland conservation. For example, to really understand what they do, what they think. So then you get like smaller case studies that can help you highlight some of the key success factors. So that can help you highlight some of the key success factors. So I would say you would need to do a combination of both quantitative and qualitative. So for the survey, the sampling size is you identify the population, and then of course you do some sort of random sampling in order to get the number that will represent, and then use qualitative research methods, qualitative method to dig down to get a more in-depth perspective. That would be my answer. So Zongbe, I hope I have answered your question. And there's a question from Cambodia. Okay, I will have take. In the presentation, yes, we see the graph with price and cost and distance. These are quantitative. How we relate this quantitative data into qualitative, qualitative data. Okay, so here, and this is what I was explaining a few moments ago. When we talk about qualitative research, we tend to think that it is just about trying to interpret interviews or perspective or opinion. And what I'm showing you is that it is not true, because you can interpret actual numbers. So in the example that I've shown you, I can explain based on the cost of transport, because I understand the context, why is it this high per kilometer? Price of fuel, the trucks are old, the operators are just small operators, and there's a lot of competition. So from that actual number, there is a reason why it is like this. Or the cost of crossing the border, why is it high? Because you have to pay under-table money, it's very complicated, so on, and so forth. So this is how you relate what you call here quantitative data into qualitative interpretation. Because it can be explained, it can be interpreted, but you have to know the context. And this is why I don't like this way of saying this is qualitative, this is quantitative, because at the end of the day, it's all combined. Everything will depend on the research question.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ruth.
Question.
Oh.
We'd like to know how we can be sure about reliability of the result of feedback we got from the interview, especially for some sensitive research issues. Again, the saturation perspective. If they start saying the same thing, if they start saying the same thing, after a while, then you know that's a perspective. We're not saying that it is the truth. It is a perspective. It is the observation. So maybe we need to go back. What do we mean by reliability? Is it the research reliability, or what are they actually saying? Probably the research reliability is there, but what they're saying may not make sense, which is another story. So hopefully I've answered some of your questions, and I would like to give my microphone back to Stéphane. Or dear partner.
Thank you, Ruth. Stéphane, would you like to say something?
No. Well, about the last question, I think also in addition about Ruth just explained, we have to cross the answer from the interviewer. There's when you target one topic, sometimes you go this way, but maybe you don't take the best road. And you need to ask in different way the same question, and to write in the book what people say from this guy and another guy, just to have a cross-cutting strategy, a transversal strategy, and maybe it gives you more chance to have a good information about what you are looking for.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your clarification,
Simulation
Stéphane.
technique. Yeah, you will find these tools in the book and the link I just sent you. Thank you, Ruth, for that.
All right, thank you. And Ruth, if you agree, I would like to send your presentation to the participant. Is that okay to you? Or...
That's fine. That's fine. No worries.
Okay.
No
So,
copyright.
yeah. Yes, Stéphane?
Yeah, and I would like to underline again that each plenary session will be recorded, and we will upload the session on WANASEA website. So you will be able to hear, and hear again, our colleague Ruth with pleasure. And we will we will upload all materials, the PowerPoint, the PDF, etc. So don't be nervous about that. You will have full information about each from each speaker. If we are done for this morning, I would like to thanks again Ruth for this time and all preparation. Thanks for that again. And thanks for Chiang Mai University for the organization and the Zoom meeting. Have a very good lunch, all of you. And we will meet at 3 p.m. So be online just before 3 p.m. For another topic with another speaker. It will be very interesting, and I hope you will be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. See you this afternoon. Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
forest fire control by local people. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, both student mobility among students from Southeast Asia, we first organized this workshop, ASEAN Water Platform in Ho Chi Minh City.